What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mike Rashid. I have a very special guest with me. A good friend of mine, Dan Rearden. This is the CEO of Muscle Jeans. Came all the way from across the globe from the UK. Actually, he was just in FIBO in Germany and it came out here. I know you guys have been wanting the results of the Muscle Jeans test. And guess what? My results are so fascinating. He had to come here direct to talk about it. Nah, but they are pretty fascinating, at least to me. It will help you optimize your training, your nutrition, and whatnot. You know, it's very amazing to me. And I'm gonna tell y'all something. I know I see some of the comments. Some people think, oh, this is just a scheme for people to make money. Listen, I don't stand behind things that I don't believe in. I will fight to the death for something that I believe in. This shit is legit, trust me. And I find it to be very beneficial, very helpful in the advancement of my, my fitness, my health. And I think that you guys should have an open mind and really pay attention to what they're doing, because this is very progressive in this industry. And that's what we want. We want good, solid, progressive things. And this is, at the forefront of that. So I'm going to let Dan go ahead and tell you about some of the results, because it's very fascinating. Some of it is very scientific. Some of the shit I don't understand. So I need him to explain it, and we'll go from there.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Mike. It's from the point of view of our company, Muscle Jeans, it's been great to actually test you, Mike, because obviously we've known each other now for a good few years. I know a lot about Mike's training principles, so for us to be able to, using these real life examples to sort of, compare how the results do compare to real life is phenomenal. So just for everybody out there, in terms of genes, just some very, very basic scientific information. You get genes from your parents, okay? You get a copy from each of your parents, and what we're looking for is the combinations of these genes, and specifically the ones that have evidence for anything to do with sports performance, fitness, nutrition, even the use of certain supplements. And then what we do is we examine for these genes and then ultimately provide recommendations to people about how they can improve their training, improve their performance based on these particular results. For people like you, for us, it's actually often about working with you to understand why things have worked in the past. Like I'm not going to tell you how to build muscle. You know how to build muscle. What's cool for us is actually to track back to our information, use your information, and just bridge that gap between science and real world. And that's one of the things that we really enjoy doing, actually, is working with lots of bodybuilders and pro athletes, because we actually do want to bridge that gap between science and real world. So you get a copy of one copy from your mother, one copy from your father of your genes, and then obviously these can be different genes or different alleles, and then different genes, different alleles mean different things. And often it's you'll hear people saying about people being born with genetic potential, people being born good at things. That's not how we work, because actually most of the evidence and research for anything to do with genetics is actually all to do with the way people adapt to training or adapt to nutrition and things like that. So it's not actually, if you just take somebody and they don't do anything, well, they're not going to be good at, at lifting. They're not going to be good at running. It's not about that. It's not about saying that you're naturally good at this. It's actually about saying, if you train in such a way, you can potentially, reach your genetic potential, or go beyond your genetic potential to achieve certain things. So we test for we actually test for a whole load of genes, but the main genes that we're going to just focus on today, just for some of the training information to give it back to you, is 6 of the really important high level genes. So genes to do with speed and power, genes to do with aerobic capacity, genes to do with the ability to burn fat, or more specifically, how your body converts from burning carbohydrates to burning fat at times of things like dieting. Genes that have got an association to perhaps the times of the day that you're better to train, and things like cortisol release, and then genes that have an association to things like anabolic signaling and stuff like that, which is obviously pretty important for building muscle. So just based on your raw genetics, if you were someone that had never trained, looking at genes like ACE, actin-3 and PPAR alpha, you would look at someone like you and say, you probably have a fairly sort of even portion of even portions of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. You're certainly probably above average in terms of your ability to build fast twitch muscle fibers, which is obviously the stuff that you want to build if you're going to be getting muscular. But what's more important is knowing that actually you have the potential to get very powerful, get very strong, and also to build muscle and build significant amounts of muscle. So you have the right combinations of alleles within these specific genes. Now, we're not going to give out specific gene information because, strictly speaking, that is it's medical information. And we operate the same confidentiality that a doctor and a patient would have, and we certainly don't believe that you should be giving out specific numbers or specific genes because it's private, confidential information. So we're just talking very generally. Now, if we look specifically at how Mike's trained in the past, so we all know Mike for overtraining and the concepts around overtraining. And ultimately, when we're talking about overtraining with you, we're talking about doing big training sessions, high volumes, lots of reps, multiple sets, all those kinds of things. And actually, with Mike's gene combinations, in order for Mike to build muscle and in order for you to get strong, you would have to be doing multiple sets. Mike's ability to recover based on certain genes like actin-3, it would indicate that you recover very quickly. So there'd be no issues with you training one day to the next. Training hard one day to the next, maybe even training the same muscle groups one day to the next. Theoretically, you should be recovering from that. So for you, if you were ever to follow a training program of, say, low reps, 6 to 12 for 3 sets, that sort of training, you might not get the same benefits because your body is so well adapted to high training volumes and high training frequencies. So certainly kind of rooting back to the things that have worked in the past.
And let me interject real quick. Now, so based on scientific and medical research on me, on Mike Rashid, it shows that I have the ability to recover from one muscle. I can train the same muscle group twice in a row and hard. Okay, now if you guys were just to go off of what they say, what's in the textbooks, one muscle group a week, you know what I mean? You need a whole week to recover. If someone like me followed that kind of protocol, I wouldn't grow. You understand? So I need, and this is good to hear this from, not just from my experience or what some would call bro science. That's a bullshit term. I like bro. I'm a bro scientist. You know what I mean? Because if we didn't have bro science, nobody would reach their full potential. Nobody would, exceed what they say that you can do. So anyway, if I had not, found ways to optimize my own training, and not, hearing it from here is a breath of fresh air for me because it knows that at least I'm doing what's right for me, and I'm not being confined to what the typical training protocol says that I should do, so it's good hearing that from this. Well,
you touched on a really good point there as well about bro science, because that exactly going back to what I said at the beginning, the idea of this is that we want to bridge the gap. We actually want to take the science and we want to work with guys that have got the cool experience that you've got and actually bridge that gap, and rather than assuming things aren't right, actually figure out the reasons why. It's much more interesting to find out why someone's right than it is to try and tell them they're wrong. And obviously things like this, and even if you look at the research, so the research for somebody with Mike's sort of combinations of genes is that in order to get, for example, strength gains, you would have to train at high volumes and with high repetitions. That's the way it would work for you. Right. So it's really, really cool. Now, one of the other things obviously is training frequencies. One of the things that I will say is that with your gene combination for actin-3, is that actin-3 is a gene that leads to the formation of a protein called alpha-actinin, and you do produce alpha-actinin. Now, alpha-actinin, it's kind of one of these proteins that there's still a lot of more work that's still being discovered. Well, there's lots more things that's still being discovered about it. It seems to have protective effects on muscle, and it seems to potentiate a lot of anabolic signaling to fast twitch muscle fibers. So for people that do produce a lot of alpha-actinin, they certainly seem to have more fast twitch muscle. They tend to be more powerful. They tend to be fast runners and all those sorts of things. But they also tend to have much better anabolic signaling. So, for example, interesting little bit of science with regards to anabolic signalling. That what it would seem to happen is that people that have the people that produce alpha-actinins seem to get more activation of mTOR, which is one of the signaling pathways that leads to protein synthesis, muscle repair, muscle growth. So another good reason why how you train, you're getting much more anabolic signaling, more testosterone, more activation of mTOR, and every reason why you're potentially growing. With regards to training frequency, that's pretty important. If we start looking at aerobic potential, you actually have a pretty good aerobic potential, and interestingly, and because I've trained with Mike a number of times, I know that you can just keep going. And if you look at the Iron marathons that you've done and things like that, you do just keep going. So you actually must have some aerobic potential. You must have the ability. You've got muscular endurance to be able to just keep doing the things that you do. So it just kind of shows us, that you have a really good balance of power and strength, but you also have the endurance capacity as well, and the endurance capabilities. And again, that is reflected in your genes. That you have that good aerobic potential. So. The genes that we look at for aerobic potential, you have good combinations for those.
Nice.
If we look at metabolic rate and fat burning potential, if you didn't train, you would probably have a relatively average ability to burn body fat and an average ability to, say, switch from carbohydrate metabolism to fat metabolism. But the thing is, you do train, and you have trained, and you train for a long time, you built lots of muscle, and therefore that ability increases because you've got a lot of very metabolically active tissues that you're obviously going to be burning lots of calories with. So your ability to burn fat, and in fact I already know your ability to drop body fat, you do it very quickly. So but again, it's pretty well reflected in your gene. Well, this is a good example actually where your genes might say one thing, but if you train in the right ways, as is the purpose of what we say to people, we're recommending we're telling you what to do in order to achieve your goals. This is an example where you can exceed, perhaps what your genes might naturally have wanted you to do. The other interesting one for you is one of the genes which we call the clock gene. And it's a gene that looks at, it gives an indication of the times of the day that you're perhaps more active, whether it's more metabolically active, more active in terms of, your mind, as well as your body. And actually your gene combination would suggest that you should probably train in the mornings or in the early afternoon. And that actually if you train in the evening, it might be a lot more counterproductive for your gains and strength gains, size gains, etc. And the other thing as well is that you probably aren't very good if you don't get much sleep. So in day-to-day life, not just in training, but in just day-to-day life, if you have inadequate sleep, you probably don't function particularly well. So that's another thing that's reflected in this particular gene. Now, your overall combination of genes, what we also know with you is that you probably produce higher amounts of testosterone, and you probably produce higher amounts of cortisol and IGF-1 as well. Now, I'm sure there's probably people on camera now worrying about, if you produce lots of cortisol, how can you build muscle if you produce lots of cortisol? But actually, if you think about it, if you train hard enough, you should produce a lot of cortisol, because if you train hard enough, you should actually, stress your body enough that you probably do produce a lot of cortisol. So after you've trained, having large amounts of cortisol is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's probably one of the things that's contributing to you being able to recover quite quickly is you're producing cortisol and you're getting a lot of the repair effects, starting straight away. So yes, it's a stress hormone, but it's released at times of stress as well. So. So you're obviously producing a lot of that, and obviously producing a lot of IGF-1, which, if you're producing a lot of IGF-1 for muscle growth and development, etc., it's obviously a really, really good thing. You've got good insulin function. You've got great blood flow. You probably don't suffer with much oxidative damage, you probably don't have, a lot of issues with, worrying about things like hypertension, and you probably don't need to worry about too much about things like diabetes at this stage, as long as your whole diet, nutrition, training, everything all stays on track, and you don't do sort of the bad things, lifestyle related things that cause problems. So overall, you have a very interesting gene combination for these high level genes, and it's pretty clear why you've kind of you're able to train how you train. Certainly why you've developed in the way that you have. I mean, you know, I've seen pictures of you from when you were a lot younger where you were training differently. And then if you look at pictures of Mike, say over the last, say, 5 years, where, you know, you've grown a lot, and you look at the training techniques, you can kind of see a lot of that sort of mirrored in sort of the gene results. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
This is fascinating. I find this highly fascinating. You guys are hearing it right now. This is my first time hearing it as well. He told me a little bit about it on our way over here, but just going into depth like this is my first time, you know, hearing it. So you guys are getting it with me. This is very, very interesting. And one thing I do want to point out is where it say that it says I'm average at burning fat. So it goes to well, genetically, I'm average at burning fat. So if I was just a regular guy, not doing anything, you know, active, I would probably have a lot more body fat and probably be fluffy and frumpy and all of those fun things. But it just go to show. But now, you know, I do the amount of muscle that I have on my body, I burn fat fast, and I lose body fat whenever I think about it. I get lean. So it shows how we can, you know, with the proper optimization, proper training, you know, eating right, we can like kind of exceed our genetic potential, you know, by doing the right things and adapting to, you know, progressive things with our health, with our fitness, with our eating. So this is good. This is very good stuff to know, man. So would you say I'm like a genetic freak?
I would say that by looking at this, you've definitely exceeded potentially. If you know exactly what you've just said. If you were just an average guy and you didn't train how you trained and you hadn't figured it all out, because this is another important thing, that you've been training for a long time. You've figured this out yourself.
Right.
You know, the course, let's say, for example, if you hadn't figured this out and you did this test and we were able to give you this sort of information, obviously, you know, it's only a benefit to people, you know, right. So, you know, and that's kind of where we come from with it. But are you a genetic freak? I would say that you've got, from a genetic point of view, I think there's still a fair amount left in you. Yeah. I've not seen any slowdown in your growth for the last, you know, good few years. So you have a very, very good genetic basis, and it's going to be very interesting over the next 3, 4, 5 years just to see how big you can get. You know, I'd be interested to see if you could start getting up to like the 240, 250 mark, you know, and seeing, you know, how your particular style of training, you know, where does it stop? Right. And the other interesting thing here is that how Mike trains, you know, I'm not saying that if you've got these genes, that's how you should train, because if you want to look like Mike, you know, obviously his training works, and it just might be that if you don't have the same genetics, you need to go through a slightly different process to build up to being able to train, you know, with this, like you guys train. So, but from your genetic basis, you have very strong genetics. So you could certainly be considered a genetic freak, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting just to see how far you can go. Right. And of course, the next thing now is these are the 6 high-level genes. We're actually now testing Mike for a load of the really, really, really interesting genes that would actually prove whether or not you have some of the genetic freak tendencies. So we're actually testing you for things like myostatin, a load of different mutations for myostatin. We're testing some of your steroid hormone binding globulin genes and all these, and a lot of kind of testosterone and steroid related hormone genes. So we're actually going to be testing you for a whole lot more. So the next time I come over, we can shoot a video about some of the real kind of genetic freak tendencies. Cool. But at this stage, and in terms of your training and things like that, it's all there. So, and it's you know, it makes it understandable why at the moment you just keep growing. Right.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is, you know, I don't eat 1,000,000 calories a day. However, lately I've been eating a lot more. So, because I am trying to, you know, put on some clean size, some clean mass. Before I had just been trying to maintain as far as like my weight. I didn't want to really get too big, but right now I want to get a little bigger. So I've been eating a lot more. So I have been seeing my body respond to it. In terms of the genetic freak thing, I was kidding. I never thought that I was a genetic freak. I thought I was an average guy who adapted to you know, how I train.
Yeah.
And I tell you guys all the time, I'm a hard gainer, always been. So, and this says it too, like I had to train the way that I train for me to get gains. And I figured it out on my own. So this is kind of confirming what I've already figured out. And that's a good thing. Not everybody's figured it out yet. So this is a good means in which to find where you're strong at, where you're weak at, and suggest what you might want to do. Because the suggestions in here, we didn't go over the suggestions, but the suggestions are for me to train the way that I train. So it makes perfect sense. So this is great. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure, Mike.
Coming down.
It's been great for us as well. We've obviously learnt a lot from working with Mike. You know, we're as I say, what we're looking to do with Muscle Genes is bridge the gap between science and the real world. And you know, and yeah, it's great to have, you know, people like you know, saying things like that. So yeah, we're really
absolutely
pleased. Thank you very much.
And bridging the gap is what it's all about. You'll hear me or CT, you know, talk shit about MC squared, egghead motherfuckers, and it's just that I respect Dan so much because his background in science and medicine is pretty legit. And what you have is, you know, he's a person that's super interested and loves our sport, loves the industry and the lifestyle. And he's, you know, he may not be a bodybuilder, but he's with us all the time, studying us. You know, he's not one of those guys who's just writing fucking reports and telling us what we need to do better. And you know what I mean? They've created an extensive test on our genes. You know what I mean? And they're, you know, watching the training. He's training with us. Like, they're actually living it and really trying to bridge that gap versus researching some shit and telling us, like, this is how it is and that's it. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. So bridging the gap is what it's all about, you know? So I appreciate everything you guys do. This is great.
Well, we you know, as I say, we appreciate working with guys like you, and you know, it's going to be an interesting few years ahead because we got a lot going on with it, and obviously we're testing more and more people. So yeah, this is awesome. And
you will see me at Body Power with Muscle Genes. I'll be over in the booth a little bit. You know,
well, that's the formal announcement now.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. You heard it here first.
All right, y'all. So y'all go ahead and check it out. MuscleGenes.com. Don't sleep on this. This is revolutionary stuff right here. All right.